Hey, welcome back to the Great Academy as we continue our journey through the task and skills of comprehending question B on paper 1. We're going to explore possibilities for writing in this sort of area through samples of uh, talks and to written material that you might find. And I hope these will inspire you. That the aim is to give you a vibe. Now, there's a list of formats here that have actually come up in recent years in comprehending B. So would you pause and have a look at them, because they are like the genres that you might be likely to explore in an exam setting. Pause. So I assume you paused, and we're now moving on here. I'm going to mention to you, having already introduced you to the importance of tone and getting the style right for the different genre, what we call register. I'm going to introduce you as well to the handy notion of voice. If you imagine the voice you're trying to put on in writing for the task, I think that will get you a large part of the journey of credibility on question B tasks. You might just read the text of that there for a moment. You wish to pause and then resume. So, a little exercise. And there's a worksheet that will pose these as well, and afterwards you'll be able to fill in the worksheet. Which one of these is formal? Would my tone of voice, well, it should be helpful, shouldn't it? Well, if I don't give you an answer, does that freak you out? If I decline to spell out the obvious to you, will you feel more respected? So I'm going to assume you have the smarts to work out which of those is more formal. Oh, another pair. She PM'd me that she was snowed under. Well, she informed me that she was extremely busy. Now, which one of those, A or B, do you think is the more formal? Again, I think the voice gave it away there. A third one. I suggest you take a break and lie out under the sun. Hey, dude, how about you catching some rays? Now, I think my voice there would be misleading, yeah, as to which of those should be conveyed in a formal tone and which should be conveyed in an informal tone of voice. So there is further assistance in that point for you to decide. Now, the voice here, you can imagine the person on the right listening to the podcast in New York, is formal in tone, but very charming, and is very committed to the highly interesting subject that you're going to hear about. It will take you 5 minutes to listen to it. And I recommend it because I think you can hear a lot of skills of the uses of different types of language that we earlier had mentioned, like information, narrative, touch of persuasion and arguments too. And the whole thing is rather aesthetic. I hope you'll agree by the time you get to the end of it.
This is the Memory Palace. I'm Nate DeMeo.
This is the Memory Palace. I'm Nate DeMeo. A quick stroll through Lafayette Square, located just across the street from the White House. Presidents have been able to see it from northern windows since it was formally dedicated in 1824. Before that, it was a racetrack, and, we are told, a market where people bought and sold other people. But then they made it a park. First, just a field and some apple trees. Then they put up a little fence, just high enough to keep cows from wandering in, and to distinguish it as a park. A green place in which to walk or play or picnic. An open space which folks were free to use as they saw fit, to fill with the stuff of life. They put up its first statue in 1851. It is of Andrew Jackson on horseback. It was the first equestrian public sculpture in America, and it established a trend of placing bronze racists on bronze horses. That was a time-honored tradition for a long time. They planted spreading oaks and London plane trees, and black lampposts along crisscrossing paths, room for benches and triangular flower beds. The lamps used to be gaslit, used to cast flickering shadows in which lovers would meet. And there is a story about the son of Francis Scott Key, who used to meet up with the wife of a congressman in those shadows, until that congressman saw him sitting on a bench and shot him in broad daylight. But I don't care about that story right now. I care, on this June afternoon, about the uses of this park over the years, and the freedom public parks can provide. I care about how in the 1890s, gay black men and transgender women held what they called an annual drag race, when they would wear dresses and jewelry and beautiful hats and parade through the city and dance in Lafayette Square. Washington, D.C. was one of the American cities most open to gay people back then, as it was in the 1930s, when the federal bureaucracy expanded. They needed people to fill positions in the Works Progress Administration, in the Social Security Administration, in the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and all that. Historians tell us that some unknowable but large number of gay women and men seized the opportunity to take a civil service exam that would allow them to leave home, where so many didn't feel wanted or safe, and they came to D.C. from their towns and their cities to change their lives. And in Lafayette Square Park, among the flowers and the elms, the heroic statuary, they would find each other. And the park was the center of gay life in the district until the 1950s. Joe McCarthy waged his crusade against communism and subversion and dissent, while the Eisenhower administration began to purge homosexuals and suspected homosexuals from the ranks of the government. And the police started a campaign of harassment and violence targeting gay people in Lafayette Park. In the 19-teens, Alice Paul and the National Women's Party set up their headquarters on the edge of the square. They wanted to be close to the White House, right where the action was, so they could better lobby President Wilson to support voting rights for women. And when he wouldn't take their meetings, they took to the park and picketed every day in full view of the president. Protested like William Thomas, truck driver and carpenter, who found in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount a calling. And in June of 1981 began a vigil in Lafayette Square, calling for nuclear disarmament. He was joined later that summer by Conchita Picciotto, and the two of them maintained their protest in a tent in the square across from the White House, through the heat of summer and cold of winter, summer after summer, and winter after winter, until their deaths, his 28 years later, hers 35 years later, when the torch of protest was picked up by other activists who continued to demand change in the park outside the president's window. The park where many hundreds of citizens, protesters and journalists, clergy, gathered on an afternoon in June to peaceably call for an end to police brutality and state violence, and were marched on by men with shields, who swung batons and elbows, and fired rubber bullets and tear gas on the order of their government, so their president could appear in a photograph.
You pick up a lot more a second or even a third time. Also in terms of technique, I found it moving, mesmerizing too. So voice in writing is what has been the focus here, and it doesn't necessarily mean the human voice, to the vocal cords, although it did in the case of that podcast. But voice is used in terms of the construction of a personality and attitude and way of getting into the material. And it should always be appropriate for the genre. And there are different genre styles. So both voice and genre are part of what we're exploring at the moment. And I will continue to do so immediately in the next lesson, which you can tune into straight away if you want to. Otherwise, you take a small break between presentations like this. But in the meantime, happy going back over stuff and learning and thinking too. And see you very soon from the Great Academy here. Thank you.